Hello friend, welcome back to Seasonally Productive. My name is Caitlin and today I'm taking you along as I work on some preservation projects. I think this is the last compilation style preservation video that I'm doing. I have 3 more I think, but they are all singular product videos, kind of more like recipe style. Today we're going to be tackling a lot of farmers market stuff. So I have, what do I have? I have corn, I have lots of tomatoes, some celery, I have fruit from the fruit truck to deal with, cucumbers, some apples from a friend. So just kind of a real good motley of stuff. I have to start with these herbs though, actually, because they are on my dehydrator sheets and I need them to start the first actual project. So I'm just taking all of my leaves and bits here and flowers and getting them into appropriate jars for me to deal with in a future, at a future time, future Caitlin. I do plan to do some sort of herb garbling. I still have some to do yet of dried herbs. So if you're interested in that, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so when that video goes live, you will get a direct notification. Anyway, I'm just taking these and moving them off the trays, getting them put into more appropriate locations, temporary storage until, as I said, I can use them. So use them for teas or other. So that's corn silk that's going in there right now. It is great for whatever ailments you may have. Most of these are going to get used as teas. So now that I have that cleaned up and I have my dehydrator trays back, I can get to the fruit. This here is going to be fruit leather in the food processor. I got some strawberries, blackberries, and some raspberries in there. I'm just going to whir those up and get them on the sheets. And I'm also going to do dehydrated strawberries. So I'm drying these primarily for in granola. We like to snack on them as well, but my primary reason was for granola. Just slicing them into, I don't know, about a 1/4 inch thick and laying them out on the dehydrator trays, and those will go for, I don't know, maybe 12 to 15 hours. They should be good to go after that. Alright, time to tackle that fruit leather. So I do have this one sheet that goes in my dehydrator for fruit leathers, but I only have the one. So I wanted to make more than that, and I used just a silicone baking sheet on a proper baking sheet, and I spread the liquid on that and then popped it in the oven. So don't think you need a dehydrator to make fruit leather. As long as you have an oven on a low temp, you should get the same effect. Tastes just as good. Alright, starting into a preservation project here, another one. We're going to be doing ketchup. So I did recently release a video on how I made my tomato ketchup. This, what you're seeing here, was done before that video, and I actually like this version better because it uses dates instead of honey, and I just like the deeper flavor that a date gives over honey. But I've got onions and garlic going in here, and then just a whole lot of tomatoes. These I believe are ox heart, got them from the farmer's market. They're a nice meaty tomato, and I'm getting that all on the stove to cook down. And then once it cooks down a bit, it's getting run through my food mill here, and then it'll go back on the stove to reduce even further, and I'll add some spices in there and other things. You can see the dates as I'm whirring this up. So the dates were added on the stove and they were allowed to soften and get nice and cook down and release a lot of that flavor. That's when you add the dates, is before, well, you add them with the tomatoes and the onions and the garlic. Alright, it is the next day. The fruit leather is ready. It is harder to peel off of that sheet too. I do prefer the silicone baking sheet because it's nice and it is naturally made to release, obviously, silicone. So that is a lot handier. However, I did kind of, I don't know, I didn't really forget about it, but I had the oven off, but I forgot about it. The strawberries are also done, so I can get those into a little container and they'll be ready for when I need to make granola. Okay, starting the morning off with some tea as well. I usually use this little tool here unless I'm making, you know, a big pot. That green thing is more for single serve. So I'm just adding in little bits of this and that. I think I got birch leaf, yarrow, rose hips, clover, corn silk, and fireweed, I think is what I have in this tea this morning. Now it got late on me the night before, so I just stuck the ketchup in the fridge and I'm pulling it back out now to get it hot and cook down some more, filling up my canner here because it takes forever to heat. So that's kind of the top priority on this day. And just adding in some vinegar to the ketchup to make it safe for canning. Next project we're going to start today is the apple chutney. So this is a bag of apples a friend gave me, and I had asked her for some and I was like, you know, they don't need to be great, and she's like, actually I have a bag of just, you know, the non-pretty ones. I'm like, perfect, I'm using it to make chutney, they don't have to be perfect. And then I looked at them, I was like, excuse me, these are just as good as any that I would eat or make pies out of or whatever. So they you know, it's funny how one person is doesn't always think that what they have is the best, but then somebody else thinks that it is just, you know, phenomenal. So this was actually from my friend Michelle over at D6. I will link her channel in the comments the description box below. So thanks, Michelle, for your beautiful apples. They became a wonderful chutney for us. Getting them all cut up, and then they're going to go in the crock pot with some other ingredients. So I put some dates and raisins in there, and now I'm throwing in some spices. I got mustard seed, ginger, and ground cloves. Have to add some vinegar, so I'm doing obviously white distilled vinegar, and I'm also throwing in some of my homemade apple cider vinegar. I still cannot remember to pick up pH tests when I go to the city, so I don't know if my own vinegar is safe for canning. I don't know that it's 5%, which is why I mix it with the white vinegar, and it also does add a different flavor, but I also wouldn't have enough just of my homemade apple cider vinegar for all of the canning that I do. Next, I'm going to put in some hot peppers. I have a mixture here of jalapenos, these yellow ones that are not spicy, and then these little red buggers that are really spicy. So I'm going to get those in. I don't want this to be, you know, a super hot condiment, so I'm not adding, you know, too much. Alright, time to add in some crushed garlic cloves, and then I can get this crock pot working for me. So that's kind of the reason I put it in here, was so that I didn't have to watch it so much. It does have to cook for quite a while, and I didn't want to be constantly worrying about it, especially if we're in and out of the house. It also is another big pot. So you guys know I have the ketchup in the other pot, so this works good to have another large cooking vessel and not have to worry about washing out my ketchup pot right away. Speaking of, here's how it's looking. Still pretty liquidy. Okay, switching gears, I'm measuring out some of these little cherry tomatoes. They're going to be for another type of salsa, so I'm saving all of those, and then I'm going to cut up the rest of these tomatoes for diced tomatoes. And I'm also doing another salsa recipe. It's kind of a riff on my mom's salsa recipe, so I call it not my mom's salsa recipe, and well, you'll see it coming up. So with the tomatoes, I'm adding some onions and some garlic and then some peppers. My mom's salsa recipe also calls for celery. I have this beautiful bunch of celery from the farmer's market, so I have to clean that up anyway. I'm going to add some into the pot as well. Okay, now those little cherry tomatoes. I decided to try and roast them on the barbecue to get some color on them. It didn't work that great, but so I have them on here with the onions and the garlic, just kind of, trying to char them up a bit, and I think there was just too much moisture and they kind of got more, I don't know, like poached or braised instead of charred like I wanted. Ketchup is done and canned. Now this is that pot of not my mom's salsa recipe. Coming along nicely there. I like to have it quite finely diced instead of big chunks. And now it's time to work on this last salsa recipe. This I found online through a YouTube video, so I will try to find it, but it's a Southwest salsa. So I'm chopping up some purple onion here, and that's going to go with those veggies that we roasted on the barbecue in the cast iron skillet. You would have seen the corn in the bowl there, and then I'm also adding some heat in the form of jalapenos. I believe the recipe called for lime juice, however, we didn't have any. I just decided to use some bottled lime. That's what my husband picked me up at the store, so I just threw that in there. And then I think it called for cilantro. I have coriander. I'm using that instead, and then just throwing in a little bit of celery leaves, actually, since I didn't have cilantro. So I'm using celery leaves and coriander in place of cilantro. And now I have the two salsa recipes on the stove, and I'm using my meat masher to kind of break up those little cherry tomatoes. Finally, dicing up the last of these tomatoes, and these are just going to be for canned diced tomatoes. I like to have that on hand for things like primarily chilies, but also maybe like a stew or a soup if I need something like that in the pantry. Alright, time to get canning these two salsa recipes. So the first one that's ready is the not my mom's salsa recipe. You can see I have it pretty finely diced there. I didn't run it through the food processor or the mill or anything like that. I just made sure I chopped everything quite small, and then as the tomatoes were cooking, I really smashed them good. And how I do my diced tomatoes is I put a little bit of lemon juice in the bottom. You could also use like vinegar or citric acid, but I'm using lemon juice. And then I'm also going to add in a little bit of salt. I don't always add salt, but this time I did. And then just the tomatoes on top of that, and then those will go in the water bath canner. Time to get the Southwest salsa canned up. I just love this corn, and yeah, I love that there's corn in it. I think that adds a lot of just texture and flavor and dimension to it as well. Putting the Southwest salsa and the diced tomatoes into my water bath canner and getting those going. Now it's time to get some supper in here. Guys, I told you, this is just a real life day. We're having rabbit tonight, so it's a rice and rabbit dish, adding in some ingredients. This here is a wild mushroom, putting that into kind of just whatever we have. This was a recipe, but I didn't have all the ingredients, so I'm just kind of making do with what I have. Getting that in the oven. Now on to cleaning up this celery. So it was quite dirty, it needed to be washed and cleaned up. I'm keeping the leaves. I'm going to be freezing those, and I dehydrated some as well. So I'm cutting all the leaves off, and then the stalks, so the more slender stalks, I'm going to save for soups and broth, and then the thicker bottom kind of stalks are going to be cut up for steam blanching and freezing. I'll flash freeze them first, and then I'll put them in a bag. I didn't, it just doesn't amount to a whole lot, so it's just in one bag, and then I'll just pull it out as I need it. So I just diced up those celery, and they're going to get in the steamer here right away. Also had some cucumbers that needed to be dealt with, so I sliced those up, and some garlic, and got them into jars with some dill. There's me putting the celery into the steamer there. I'm also going to just use the rest of these jalapenos for one more little jar of pickled jalapenos. draining the celery, and then that'll dry and go onto a freezer sheet, and then reserving that hot water to make my brine for my pickles here, and then just adding some vinegar to that and mustard seeds and salt. I'm putting alum in the jars. I don't know if it really makes a difference, but let me know in the comments if this is something common that you use or not. Had leftover brine, so that'll go in the fridge for something else. All right, finally, time to get back to this chutney. It's been cooking all day. I'm getting it into a pot to reduce. Here it is. Got it all kind of mashed up there, and it's gonna start reducing. I wanted to show you guys these mushrooms we found. This shaggy mane is massive, and then we found this one as well. We harvested the last of our corn from our garden and decided to get that frozen, adding some honey to my chutney, and then I'm going to cut the kernels off of the corn cobs so that I can get them blanched and frozen. The final step on this video is just to can the chutney. So I'm getting it in the jars, and it's gonna go for a nice hot bath. And that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. It feels so good to be done preserving, and I'm just looking forward to our big adventure. Stay tuned. Thanks again. See you in the next one. Bye.